On March 15, 1983, 5 children left for school in Willowbrook, Texas. They never made it. Diego Rodriguez, 10. Carmen Rodriguez, 8. Benny Thompson, 9. Lily Mae Patterson, 11. Ruby Jane Foster, 10. Gone without a trace. Police found their footprints leading to a basement wall, then nothing. For 42 years, the case stayed cold. Until 2025, when workers found Ruby Jane's backpack buried deep underground. Inside was a digital camera that shouldn't exist in 1983. The photos showed something impossible. All 5 children, alive and aging for decades in another world. How did missing children from 1983 take photos until 2025? And what was waiting for them on the other side of that wall? Detective Maria Santos held the faded photograph in her weathered hands. 5 smiling faces stared back at her from 1983. Diego Rodriguez with his gap-toothed grin. Carmen Rodriguez clutching her stuffed rabbit. Benny Thompson's freckled cheeks bright with laughter. Lily Mae Patterson standing tall and proud. Ruby Jane Foster with her arm around her best friend. 42 years. 42 years since these children vanished without a trace. Maria placed the photo next to a small muddy backpack on her desk. Construction workers had found it yesterday, buried 15 feet underground where the old Ashford house once stood. The backpack belonged to Ruby Jane Foster. Inside was something that should have been impossible, a digital camera from 1983, when such things didn't exist. But that mystery would have to wait. First, Maria needed to understand what happened that morning in March, when spring was just beginning to touch the Texas town of Willowbrook. March 15, 1983 started like any other Tuesday morning in the Rodriguez household. The smell of fresh tortillas filled the kitchen as Maria Rodriguez packed lunches for her children. Diego, 10 years old and already showing signs of his father's height, gulped down his orange juice. "Slow down, Michaud," his mother laughed, ruffling his dark hair. "The school isn't going anywhere." 8-year-old Carmen sat at the table, carefully coloring a picture of their family dog, Patches. Her tongue poked out slightly as she concentrated on staying inside the lines. She had inherited her mother's artistic eye and her father's stubborn determination. "I'm gonna show this to Mrs. Patterson today," Carmen announced, holding up her drawing. "She said she wants to see more of my pictures." Diego grabbed his backpack and headed for the door. "Come on, Carmen, we're gonna be late." "Wait." Carmen jumped up, nearly knocking over her chair. "You forgot your lunch." She ran after her brother, pressing the paper bag into his hands. "Mama made your favorite sandwiches." Diego smiled and kissed his little sister's forehead. "Thanks, Carmen. What would I do without you?" Outside, the morning air was crisp and clean. The bluebonnets were starting to bloom along the fence posts, painting the town in shades of purple and blue. Spring had always been Diego's favorite time of year. Everything felt new and full of possibilities. At the corner of Elm Street, their neighbor Benny Thompson was waiting. The 9-year-old boy bounced on his toes, his red hair catching the morning sunlight. His freckled face beamed with excitement. "Did you guys hear about the spring fair?" Benny asked as they started walking. "My dad says there's going to be a Ferris wheel this year." "A real one?" Carmen's eyes went wide. "Can we go, Diego? Please?" "We'll ask Mama," Diego promised. He liked Benny. The boy had moved to Willowbrook just 6 months ago, but he'd quickly become part of their morning routine. 2 blocks away, best friends Lily Mae Patterson and Ruby Jane Foster walked hand in hand down Maple Street. Lily Mae, 11 and the tallest of their group, had serious brown eyes and long braids that her grandmother wove each morning. Ruby Jane, 10, was smaller but fierce, with blonde curls that never seemed to stay in place. "Are you sure we should tell them?" Ruby Jane whispered, clutching a small notebook against her chest. "They're our friends," Lily May said firmly. "If something strange is happening, they should know." Ruby Jane nodded, but her stomach felt twisted up inside. For the past week, she'd been writing down all the weird things she'd noticed around town. Strange symbols carved into tree bark, shadows that moved when no one was there. And yesterday, she and Lily May had found something at the old Ashford property that made her skin crawl. The 5 children met at their usual spot, the giant oak tree near Willowbrook Elementary. The tree was older than the town itself, its thick branches spreading wide like protective arms. They'd been meeting here every morning for months, ever since Benny moved to town. "Morning, everyone," Lily May called out as she and Ruby Jane approached. "Hey, Lily May. Hey, Ruby Jane." Carmen waved enthusiastically. "Look what I drew." She showed them her picture of Patches. "That's beautiful, Carmen," Lily May said warmly. She had always been good with younger children. Her dream was to become a teacher someday. Ruby Jane pulled out her notebook, her hand shaking slightly. "Guys, I need to show you something. Remember yesterday when Lily May and I went to look at the old Ashford place?" The other children gathered around as Ruby Jane opened her notebook. The pages were filled with her careful handwriting and strange drawings. Symbols that looked like twisted letters, maps of the town with X's marked in various places. "What is all this?" Diego asked, studying the pages. "I've been seeing these symbols everywhere," Ruby Jane explained. "Carved into trees, scratched on fence posts, even drawn in the dirt behind the school. And look at this." She flipped to a page showing the outline of a house. "Yesterday we found a door in the basement of the Ashford house. It was hidden behind some old boards." Benny's eyes grew wide. "What kind of door?" "A heavy wooden door with these same symbols carved all over it," Lily May said quietly. "It felt wrong, like it was hiding something bad." Carmen moved closer to her brother. "Maybe we should tell our parents." "Tell them what?" Ruby Jane asked. "That we found a creepy door. They'll just say we're being silly." As they talked, Mrs. Henderson, the school crossing guard, waved at them from her post. She was a sweet old lady who had been helping children cross the street for 20 years. Her bright yellow vest gleamed in the morning sun. "Better get moving, kids," she called. "First bell rings in 10 minutes. But instead of heading toward school, something drew the children's attention to the old road that led past the Ashford property. The abandoned house sat on a hill, its broken windows like empty eyes staring down at the town. "Maybe we should go back," Ruby Jane said suddenly. "Just for a minute. In the daylight, it might not seem so scary." "I don't know," Diego said, glancing toward the school. "We'll be late." "Please," Ruby Jane begged. "I keep thinking about that door. What if it's important? What if we're supposed to find it?" Lily May squeezed her friend's hand. "If we're quick, we won't miss first period." Carmen looked up at her brother with trusting eyes. "If you think it's okay, Diego." Diego looked at his friends. Really looked at them. Benny's excited face. Carmen's absolute faith in him. Lily May's steady courage. Ruby Jane's desperate need to solve the mystery. These were his people, his family by choice. "Okay," he said finally. "But just for a few minutes." The 5 children walked through the rusty gate of the Ashford property, their school bags bouncing against their backs. Mrs. Henderson watched them go, assuming they were taking a shortcut to the other side of the school grounds. She was the last person to see them alive. As they disappeared behind the hill, a strange wind began to blow, carrying with it the scent of something ancient and hungry. The morning sun seemed to dim, and for just a moment, the shadows around the old house moved in ways that shadows shouldn't move. In her small notebook, Ruby Jane had written her final entry the night before, Tomorrow we're going to find out what's behind the door. Lily May says we have to be brave. I hope she's right. The morning everything changed had begun. At 8:15 a.m., the first bell rang at Willowbrook Elementary. Teachers called roll in classrooms across the small school. Mrs. Patterson marked Diego Rodriguez absent. Mrs. Miller noticed Carmen's empty desk in the second row. Mr. Johnson frowned when Benny Thompson didn't answer his name. Foster's heart skipped when she saw Lily May's chair pushed neatly under her desk, unused. And Mrs. Davis felt a chill when Ruby Jane Foster's seat remained empty. 5 empty desks. 5 missing children. Principal Johnson's voice crackled over the intercom at 8:30 a.m. Teachers, please send your attendance sheets to the office immediately. By 8:45 a.m. the phone calls began. Maria Rodriguez was washing breakfast dishes when the phone rang. She dried her hands on her apron, humming softly. Maybe it was her sister calling about Sunday dinner. Mrs. Rodriguez? This is Principal Johnson at Willowbrook Elementary. Yes. Maria's voice was cheerful, unsuspecting. I'm afraid Diego and Carmen didn't arrive at school this morning. Are they ill? The coffee mug in Maria's hand crashed to the kitchen floor. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. What do you mean they didn't arrive? I watched them leave for school an hour ago. Ma'am, I'm sure there's a simple explanation. Could you please come to the school? Maria's hands shook as she hung up the phone. She called her husband at the auto shop, her voice high and tight. Roberto, something's wrong. The kids never made it to school. 3 houses down, Eleanor Foster was hanging laundry on the line when her phone rang. She rushed inside, her heart already racing for no reason she could name. Mrs. Foster, this is about Ruby Jane. The wet sheet in Eleanor's hands fell to the floor. What about Ruby Jane? What's happened to my baby? Across town, the Thompson family was new enough that they barely knew their neighbors. But when Principal Johnson called about Benny, his mother let out a scream that brought people running from 3 blocks away. Within minutes, the news spread through Willowbrook like wildfire. 5 children missing, 5 families destroyed in an instant. Sheriff Buck Rawlings had been dealing with nothing more serious than cattle rustling and the occasional bar fight for 20 years. He'd never seen anything like the panic that gripped the town that morning. By 10 a.m. his small office was packed with frantic parents, teachers and neighbors. Now let's all stay calm, Sheriff Rawlings said, though his own voice shook. Kids don't just disappear. There's got to be a logical explanation. Roberto Rodriguez pushed through the crowd, his work clothes still smeared with motor oil. My children left for school like always. Something happened to them. Has anyone checked the route they take? Asked Mrs. Patterson, Lily May's teacher. Maybe they stopped somewhere along the way. Eleanor Foster clutched Ruby Jane's favorite stuffed animal, a worn rabbit named Mr. Hopscotch. Ruby Jane would never skip school. She loves learning. Something's wrong. Something's terribly wrong. Sheriff Rawlings organized the town into search parties. Parents, teachers, store owners and farmers. Everyone dropped what they were doing to look for the missing children. They formed lines and walked through every yard, every field, every ditch between the school and the children's homes. Mrs. Henderson, the crossing guard, was interviewed first. Her weathered face was pale with worry. I saw them, Sheriff. All 5 of them, walking together like they always do. But instead of coming to the crosswalk, they headed toward the old Ashford place. The Ashford place? Sheriff Rawlings frowned. Why would they go there? I don't know, I just figured they were taking a shortcut. Kids do that sometimes. Mrs. Henderson's voice broke. I should have stopped them. I should have called them back. This isn't your fault, Helen, the sheriff said gently. You couldn't have known. But Mrs. Henderson would carry that guilt for the rest of her life. The search focused on the abandoned Ashford property. The house had been empty since 1979, when the last of the Ashford family mysteriously left town in the middle of the night. Local children whispered stories about strange lights and sounds coming from the old place, but adults had always dismissed such tales as overactive imaginations. Now, as dozens of searchers approached the crumbling house, those stories didn't seem so far-fetched. Detective Ray Morrison arrived from Dallas at noon. He was a tall, thin man with kind eyes and 20 years of experience. Sheriff Rawlings had called him when it became clear this was beyond anything the small town could handle. "Tell me about these children," Detective Morrison said, setting up his notebook in the sheriff's office. "Were they friends? Did they usually walk to school together?" "Every morning for months," Sheriff Rawlings replied. "Good kids, no trouble at all." Detective Morrison interviewed each family separately. The pain in their eyes was almost unbearable to witness. Maria Rodriguez sat across from him, her hands twisted in her lap. "Diego is responsible. He would never let Carmen get hurt. If they're not home, it's because they can't come home." "Tell me about Diego," Detective Morrison said softly. "He wants to play Little League this year. He's been practicing every day in the backyard." Maria's voice cracked. "He promised me he'd be careful. He promised he'd watch out for Carmen." Eleanor Foster showed him Ruby Jane's room. Everything exactly as her daughter had left it. "She's been acting strange lately, writing in that notebook all the time. She said she was seeing things around town. Symbols or something." "What kind of symbols?" "I don't know. She tried to show me once, but I was busy with dinner." Eleanor's face crumpled. "I should have listened. I should have paid attention." The Thompson family was devastated. They'd moved to Willowbrook for its small-town safety. "Benny loves it here," his mother sobbed. "He said he finally found real friends. He was so happy." As afternoon turned to evening, the search of the Ashford property revealed disturbing details. In the basement, they found clear evidence that the children had been there. Fresh footprints in the dust, small handprints on the walls, and most chilling of all, scratch marks on the stone walls, as if someone had been trying to claw their way out. The trail of footprints led to a solid brick wall and stopped. The children seemed to have vanished into thin air. "This doesn't make sense," Detective Morrison muttered, studying the basement by flashlight. 5 children don't just disappear through a wall. But the evidence was undeniable. 5 sets of footprints led into the basement. None led out. As night fell, the temperature dropped to near freezing. The reality hit each family like a physical blow. Somewhere out there, their children were cold and scared. Or were. Maria Rodriguez collapsed in her husband's arms as they stood in their empty kitchen. Carmen's drawing of Patches was still on the table where she'd left it that morning. Diego's baseball glove sat by the door, waiting for a boy who might never come home to use it. "Where are they, Roberto?" Maria whispered. "Where are my babies?" Roberto held his wife close, but he had no answers. None of them did. 3 blocks away, Eleanor Foster sat by her living room window, watching the street. She'd been there for hours, waiting for a little blonde girl to come skipping home. Ruby Jane's favorite book lay open on the coffee table, bookmarked at the page where they'd stopped reading together the night before. The Ashford house loomed on its hill, like a dark secret, keeping its mysteries locked away. Whatever had happened to Diego, Carmen, Benny, Lily May, and Ruby Jane, the answers lay somewhere in that old house. But the house wasn't telling its secrets. Not yet. As the search parties finally called it a night, 5 empty bedrooms waited in the darkness. 5 families began the longest night of their lives, clinging to hope that morning would bring their children home. But morning would bring only more questions, more fears, and the terrible understanding that the 5 children of Willowbrook had vanished, as completely as if they'd never existed at all. The search had begun. The nightmare was just starting. 3 days after the children vanished, Detective Morrison made a discovery that changed everything. He was sitting in the Willowbrook Public Library at 6 a.m., surrounded by old newspapers and dusty books. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those 5 empty desks and the scratch marks on the basement walls. Mrs. Blackwood, the elderly librarian, found him there when she arrived to open the library. She was a thin woman with silver hair and sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She'd lived in Willowbrook her entire life and knew every secret the town had ever tried to hide. "You're looking into the Ashford family, aren't you?" she said quietly, setting down her coffee cup. Detective Morrison looked up from a 1923 newspaper article about Thomas Ashford's oil fortune. "What do you know about them?" Mrs. Blackwood walked to a locked cabinet behind the circulation desk. She pulled out a key and opened it, revealing a collection of yellowed newspapers and documents. Things the town would rather forget. She spread the papers across the table. Headlines from the 1920s and 1930s jumped out at Detective Morrison. "Local children missing. Strange lights at Ashford Estate. Family flees town in night." Thomas Ashford wasn't just an oil baron, Mrs. Blackwood explained, her voice barely above a whisper. He was involved in things that decent people don't talk about. Dark things. Detective Morrison studied a photograph from 1934. It showed Thomas Ashford standing in front of his mansion, but his eyes looked wrong somehow. Cold and empty. What kind of things? He believed he could open doorways to other places. He thought he could gain power by... Mrs. Blackwood's voice trailed off. By making exchanges. Exchanges? Children would disappear, Detective Morrison. Always 5 at a time. Always near his property. It happened in 1923, 1934, 1945 and 1956. Then the family left town in 1979, and everyone thought it was over. Detective Morrison felt his blood run cold. 27 years since the last disappearance, but the pattern was always 42 years apart, not 27. Mrs. Blackwood's hands shook as she pointed to a faded newspaper clipping. Until now, the headline read, "5 children vanish near Ashford Estate, 1956. Below it was a photograph of 5 young faces, smiling and innocent. The similarities to the missing children of 1983 were unsettling. "What happened to the families?" Detective Morrison asked. "They left town one by one. Couldn't stand the memories. The Ashfords owned half the town back then. Nobody wanted to ask too many questions about a powerful family." Detective Morrison gathered the papers. "I need to search that basement again. Be careful, Detective. Some doors shouldn't be opened. Some secrets are buried for good reason." That afternoon, Detective Morrison returned to the Ashford house with a team of investigators. The basement felt different in the daylight, darker somehow, as if the shadows were thicker than they should be. The scratch marks on the walls looked fresher, deeper. "Sir, you need to see this," Officer Jenkins called from the far corner of the basement. Behind a loose brick, they found a hidden space. Inside was a leather journal, its pages filled with Thomas Ashford's handwriting. Detective Morrison opened it carefully, the old paper crackling under his fingers. The entries were disturbing. Ashford wrote about the doorway and the exchange with the excitement of a man making a scientific discovery. But the content was pure nightmare. "The children must be given willingly," one entry read. "They must choose to step through the door. Force will not work. The doorway accepts only innocent souls who walk through of their own free will." Another entry, dated 1956, was even more chilling. "5 more have been accepted. The doorway grows stronger with each exchange. Soon I will have enough power to cross over myself and claim what awaits on the other side." The final entry was from 1979. "The doorway is sealed. My family fears what I have become. They do not understand that I am so close to achieving immortality. I will wait. The doorway will open again when the time is right." Detective Morrison's hands shook as he read the words. "Get the forensics team down here. Search every inch of this basement." They found more than they bargained for. Hidden behind the brick wall where the children's footprints ended, they discovered a secret room. The door was concealed so well that it looked like solid wall from the outside. The room was small and round, with stone walls covered in strange symbols. In the center was a circle carved into the floor, and within that circle, something that made Detective Morrison's stomach turn. Ruby Jane's notebook lay open on the stone floor. "Don't touch it," Detective Morrison warned as Officer Jenkins reached for it. "Get photos first. Document everything." The notebook's pages fluttered in a breeze that shouldn't have existed in the sealed room. Ruby Jane's childish handwriting filled page after page, but the later entries were different. The words seemed to writhe on the page, as if they were alive. "March 10th. Saw the shadow people again today. They're getting bolder. Lily May thinks I'm imagining things, but I know what I saw. March 12th. Found more symbols carved into the oak tree at our meeting spot. They're the same ones from the Ashford house. Something is calling to us." March 14th. "The door is in the basement. It's covered with symbols, and when I touched it, I heard voices. Children's voices, calling for help. We have to go back tomorrow. We have to help them." The final entry was dated March 15th, 1983, the morning the children disappeared. "The door is open. The shadow people are here. They're not trying to hurt us. They're trying to warn us. But it's too late. The door is hungry, and it knows we're here. If someone finds this, tell our families we love them. Tell them we're sorry." Detective Morrison closed the notebook, his heart racing. "Seal this room. Nobody goes in or out without my permission." But as the team prepared to leave, something impossible happened. The symbols on the walls began to glow with a faint, sickly light. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees in seconds, and from somewhere far away they heard the sound of children crying. "Everyone out!" Detective Morrison shouted. "Now!" They ran from the basement, leaving the secret room and its terrible mysteries behind. But as they climbed the stairs, Detective Morrison heard something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. 5 young voices calling out in unison, "Help us. Please help us. We're still here." The team sealed the basement and posted guards, but the damage was done. Word spread through Willowbrook like wildfire. The missing children weren't just lost. They were trapped somewhere terrible, somewhere beyond the reach of normal rescue. The families were devastated by the revelations. Maria Rodriguez collapsed when she heard about the notebook. "My babies are suffering," she sobbed. "They're trapped and suffering, and I can't help them." Eleanor Foster became obsessed with the symbols from Ruby Jane's notebook. She copied them onto paper and searched for their meaning in every book about the supernatural she could find. "If I can understand what Thomas Ashford was doing, maybe I can undo it," she told anyone who would listen. The other families weren't so hopeful. The Thompsons packed their belongings and left town within a week. "We can't stay here," Benny's mother said. Not knowing what we know now, Sheriff Rawlings requested help from the state police, but even experienced investigators were baffled. The evidence suggested that the children had walked into the secret room and simply vanished. The stone walls were solid. The ceiling was intact. There was no other way out. As weeks turned to months, the case grew cold. The secret room was sealed with concrete, and the Ashford house was condemned. But locals reported strange things happening on the property. Lights that shouldn't exist. Sounds that came from nowhere. And sometimes, on quiet nights, the voices of children calling for help. Detective Morrison never gave up. He filled notebook after notebook with theories and evidence. He interviewed every person who had ever lived near the Ashford property. He studied Thomas Ashford's journal until he could recite it from memory. But the children remained lost, trapped somewhere between the world of the living and whatever lay beyond Thomas Ashford's terrible door. The families learned to live with their grief, but it never got easier. Maria Rodriguez kept Diego's baseball glove by the front door and Carmen's drawing on the refrigerator. Eleanor Foster left Ruby Jane's bedroom exactly as it was, down to the book still open on the nightstand. The town of Willowbrook was forever changed. Children were never allowed to walk alone again. The crossing guard position was eliminated, too many painful memories, and the Ashford property became a place that people avoided, a dark scar on the landscape that reminded everyone of the morning 5 children walked into the shadows and never came back. But in the deepest part of the night, when the wind was just right, people still heard them. 5 young voices calling out from somewhere far away, begging to come home. The secrets in the walls had been revealed. The nightmare was far from over. 20 years had passed since that terrible morning in March. Willowbrook looked the same on the surface, but everything had changed. The town wore its grief like an old coat, faded but never removed. Maria Rodriguez stood in her kitchen, setting 5 plates on the table for Christmas dinner. She did this every year, even though Diego would have been 30 now, and Carmen 28. Her hair had turned silver, and deep lines marked her face, but her love for her missing children remained as strong as ever. "Mama, you don't have to do this," her nephew Carlos said gently. He'd moved in to help care for her after his uncle Roberto died of a heart attack 5 years earlier. The doctors said it was stress. Maria knew it was a broken heart. "They might come home," Maria whispered, adjusting Diego's plate. "They might still come home." Carlos didn't argue. He'd learnt not to. The whole family had learned to live around Maria's hope, protecting it like a fragile flame. 3 blocks away, Eleanor Foster sat surrounded by towers of books and papers. Her living room had become a research center, every surface covered with information about the Ashford family, ancient symbols, and reports of supernatural disappearances from around the world. She'd aged 20 years in the past 20, her blonde hair now white, her body thin from forgetting to eat. But her mind remained sharp, focused on one goal: understanding what Thomas Ashford had done and how to undo it. "I found another pattern, Ruby Jane," she said to the empty room, speaking to her daughter as if she was still there. "Every 42 years, but only when certain stars align. Your great-grandmother wrote about similar disappearances in Ireland. It goes back centuries." Eleanor had discovered that Thomas Ashford's obsession with doorways wasn't unique. Throughout history, powerful men had tried to open passages to other worlds. Most had failed. A few had succeeded, but at terrible cost. She'd also learned something that both terrified and gave her hope. The children taken through these doorways weren't necessarily dead. They were somewhere else, in a place that existed alongside the normal world but separate from it. "If I can find the right combination of symbols," Eleanor continued, "maybe I can open the door again. Maybe I can bring you home." Her research had consumed her life. She'd lost her job, spent her savings, and pushed away friends who worried about her obsession. But she couldn't stop. Ruby Jane was out there somewhere, and Eleanor would spend every remaining day of her life trying to reach her. Across town, in a small apartment above the hardware store, retired Detective Morrison sat at his desk. 17 notebooks filled with his theories and evidence lined the shelves. The case had cost him his marriage and his health, but he couldn't let go of those 5 children. His wife had left him in 1995, tired of competing with the ghosts of missing kids. His captain had forced him to retire in 2000 when his obsession began affecting his other cases. But Morrison kept working, using his pension to travel and investigate similar disappearances across the country. He'd found them, children vanishing near old properties, families with histories of occult practices, always in groups of 5, always leaving behind evidence that defied explanation. "There's a network," he wrote in his latest notebook. "These weren't random events. Someone or something has been collecting children for generations. But why? And where are they taking them?" Morrison had also discovered something that gave him nightmares. The disappearances were accelerating. What used to happen every 42 years was now happening every 27 years, then every 18, then every 9. "It's building to something," he muttered, studying his timeline. "All these children, all these years, someone's collecting them for a purpose." The other families had scattered to the winds. The Thompsons had moved to California immediately after the disappearance, unable to bear the memories. Benny's mother sent Christmas cards to the remaining families every year, but they never returned to Willowbrook. Lily May's parents had divorced in 1987. Her father, a former military man, had spent his life savings, hiring private investigators and following every lead, no matter how far-fetched. His garage was filled with boxes of evidence and maps marking every inch of the old Ashford property. "She's out there, and I'm going to find her," he'd tell anyone who would listen. His obsession had driven away his wife and remaining children, but he couldn't stop. Lily May had been his firstborn, his little soldier, and he'd failed to protect her. The town itself had changed in ways both visible and hidden. Willowbrook Elementary had installed new security measures. Children were never allowed to walk alone. Parents drove their kids to school, even if they lived just a block away. The old Ashford property had been sold and resold multiple times, but no one could build on it successfully. Construction equipment would break down for no reason. Workers would quit after reporting strange sounds and unexplained accidents. The land sat empty, growing wild, as if nature itself was trying to hide the secrets buried there. But the most significant change was in the children who grew up after 1983. They were different, more cautious, less trusting of the world. They played closer to home and never ventured out alone. The carefree innocence that Diego, Carmen, Benny, Lily May and Ruby Jane had possessed was gone from Willowbrook forever. In 2003, 20 years after the disappearance, the town held a memorial service. It was Eleanor Foster's idea, though she could barely stand to attend. The surviving families gathered at the old oak tree where the children used to meet each morning. Someone had carved 5 names into the bark: Diego, Carmen, Benny, Lily May, Ruby Jane. Fresh flowers lay at the base of the tree, brought by people who still remembered and cared. Maria Rodriguez, now using a walker but still determined, read a poem that Carmen had written about spring flowers. Her voice shook with emotion, but she made it through every word. She loved spring, Maria said through her tears. She loved how everything came back to life. Eleanor Foster spoke about Ruby Jane's curiosity and bravery. She wasn't afraid of mysteries. She wanted to solve them, to help people understand the world better. She would have grown up to be a scientist or a teacher, or maybe a detective like Mr. Morrison. The service was beautiful and heartbreaking. The whole town came, including people who had moved away and returned just for this day. They shared memories of 5 children who had touched so many lives in their brief time on Earth. But as the crowd dispersed and people returned to their normal lives, the 3 who remained, Maria, Eleanor, and Morrison, made a silent promise. They would never give up. They would never stop looking. They would never stop believing that somehow, some way, those 5 children would come home. Eleanor's research had revealed one more crucial piece of information. According to her calculations, the 42-year cycle would complete in 2025. If her theories were correct, whatever had taken the children would be at its strongest then. 22 more years, she whispered to Ruby Jane's photograph that night. I just need to live 22 more years, and then I'll find a way to bring you home. She didn't know if she had that much time left. The years of obsession had taken their toll on her health. But she would try, for Ruby Jane. For all of them, she would. Morrison had reached a similar conclusion through his research. His timeline pointed to 2025 as a significant year. Something was building, some terrible culmination of decades of stolen children and dark magic. I'll be ready, he promised the photographs of the 5 children that covered his desk. Whatever's coming in 2025, I'll be ready. Maria Rodriguez simply continued setting 5 plates every night, cooking for children who might never come home to eat. But hope, she had learned, wasn't about logic or evidence. Hope was about love, and her love for Diego and Carmen would never die. The long wait continued. 3 hearts that refused to give up, counting down the years until the mystery might finally be solved. In the abandoned basement where it all began, sealed behind concrete and steel, something stirred. The symbols on the walls glowed faintly in the darkness, pulsing like a heartbeat. And from somewhere far away, 5 young voices continued to call out, their words carried on winds that touched no living ear. We're still here, we're still fighting, don't give up on us, we're coming home. The darkness was patient. It had waited 42 years before, it could wait 22 more. But this time when the door opened again, it wouldn't be taking children. This time, it would be giving them back. Detective Maria Santos had never believed in ghosts or magic or anything she couldn't see with her own eyes. But holding Ruby Jane Foster's backpack in her hands, she was starting to question everything she thought she knew about the world. The call had come at 6 a.m. on March 10, 2025. Construction workers at the old Ashford site had been digging the foundation for a new shopping center when their equipment hit something impossible. 15 feet underground in what should have been solid bedrock, they found a child's backpack. Not just any backpack. Ruby Jane Foster's backpack, according to the name tag sewn inside by a mother's loving hands, 42 years ago. Detective Santos had taken over the case files when Detective Morrison retired in 2015. She'd read every page, studied every photograph, interviewed every person still alive who remembered that terrible morning in 1983. She knew those 5 children's stories by heart. She also knew that Ruby Jane's backpack had never been found during the original search. This doesn't make sense, she muttered, carefully examining the bag. It was dirty but not decayed. After 4 decades underground, it should have been rotted away to nothing. Instead, it looked like it had been buried yesterday. The forensics team worked around the clock, processing every inch of the backpack and its contents. What they found defied all logic and scientific explanation. Inside the bag was a notebook. Ruby Jane's notebook, the one mentioned in all the old reports. But this wasn't the notebook found in the secret room in 1983. This was different, newer. The pages were filled with Ruby Jane's distinctive handwriting, but the dates made Detective Santos's head spin. The first entry was from March 15, 1983. We went through the door today. It's not what we expected. The last entry was dated March 1, 2025. It's almost time, the door is getting ready to open again. We're coming home. But the most shocking discovery was a small digital camera tucked into the front pocket of the backpack. Digital cameras didn't exist in 1983. The technology was decades away from being invented. Detective Santos plugged the camera's memory card into a computer with shaking hands. The screen filled with photographs that should have been impossible. The first image showed all 5 children standing in the secret room beneath the Ashford house. But they weren't alone. Behind them, the stone wall had disappeared, replaced by a swirling vortex of silver light. Strange shadows moved within the light, reaching toward the children with what looked like welcoming arms. The next photo showed the children stepping through the vortex. Their faces showed wonder, not fear. Benny was grinning. Carmen held Diego's hand tightly. Lily May had her arm around Ruby Jane's shoulders. They looked like children about to embark on an amazing adventure. The following pictures were even stranger. They showed landscapes that didn't exist on Earth. Cities made of crystal, forests with silver leaves, skies painted in colors that had no names. And in every photo, the 5 children were there, growing older. Detective Santos scrolled through 42 years of impossible photographs. The children aging, learning, becoming something more than human but still recognizably themselves. Diego grew tall and strong, his protective nature becoming almost magical as he learned to shield others from danger. Carmen's artistic gifts bloomed into the ability to create beauty from thin air. Benny's excitement and joy became a power that could heal sadness and bring hope to the hopeless. Lily May's nurturing spirit grew into wisdom beyond her years as she learned to guide and teach others, and Ruby Jane's curiosity evolved into an understanding of mysteries that spanned dimensions. The final photograph showed all 5 children, now appearing as adults in their 50s, but with eyes that held the innocence of the 10-year-olds they'd once been. They stood before the same silver vortex, but this time they were coming through it, not going in. Detective Santa's hands trembled as she picked up her phone. "I need to speak with Eleanor Foster immediately." Eleanor Foster was now 87 years old, living in the same house where Ruby Jane had grown up. Her research had never stopped. Her living room was still covered with books and papers about dimensional doorways and supernatural disappearances. When Detective Santos arrived with the backpack and camera, Eleanor's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. She touched the bag with reverent fingers, tears streaming down her weathered cheek. "This is Ruby Jane's," she whispered. "I sewed that name tag myself." "But how?" Detective Santos showed her the photographs. Eleanor studied each one with the intense focus of someone who had spent decades preparing for this moment. "The other dimension," Eleanor breathed. "Thomas Ashford was right about the doorway, but wrong about its purpose. He thought it was a way to gain power. But look at these pictures. The children weren't taken as prisoners. They were taken as guardians. Guardians of what? The threshold between worlds." Eleanor's voice grew stronger as the pieces fell into place. "Someone has to watch the doorways, to make sure nothing evil comes through. The children weren't victims, they were chosen." Detective Santos felt a chill run down her spine. Chosen for what? To protect us. To keep the darkness on the other side where it belongs. Eleanor pointed to the final photograph. "And now they're coming back." The next discovery came from the handwriting analysis. The notebook entries spanning 1983 to 2025 were all in Ruby Jane's hand, but the writing had evolved over time. The childish letters of a 10-year-old had grown into the elegant script of an educated woman, but the most important entry was the one dated March 15th, 2025, and exactly 42 years after their disappearance. "Today is the day we come home. We've learned everything we needed to learn. We've grown into what we were meant to become. The door that took us away will bring us back, but not as the children we were. We return as guardians, protectors, and guides." Thomas Ashford was wrong. The doorway isn't a source of power to be exploited. It's a responsibility to be accepted. For 42 years we've stood watch on the other side, making sure nothing evil comes through to hurt the people we love. But our watch is ending. The old evil that Ashford awakened is finally dying. The doorway can be sealed forever, but only from this side, and only by those who have walked between worlds. We're coming home to say goodbye and to make sure no more children are ever taken. Tell our families we love them. Tell them we're proud of who we became. Tell them that every sacrifice was worth it to keep them safe. We were never lost. We were exactly where we needed to be. Detective Santos read the entry aloud to Eleanor, who wept openly for the first time in decades. "My brave girl," Eleanor whispered. "My brilliant, brave girl." But there was more. Hidden in the camera's memory were video files. Detective Santos played the first one, and Ruby Jane's face filled the screen. She looked exactly as she would have if she'd grown up normally. A woman of 52 with laugh lines around her eyes and silver threading through her blonde hair. "Hello, Mama," Ruby Jane said, her voice filled with love and sadness. "I know you've been looking for me. I know you never gave up hope. I want you to know that I'm okay. We're all okay. We've been protecting everyone we love from things you can't imagine, but our job is almost done. The evil that created the doorway is dying, and we can finally come home. Not to stay. We can't stay. But to close the door forever and make sure this never happens to another family. I love you, Mama. I've loved you every single day for 42 years, and I'm so proud of the research you did, the way you never gave up, the love you kept burning for me all this time. Tomorrow, on March 15th, at sunset, come to where the old oak tree used to be. Bring Mrs. Rodriguez if she's able. Bring anyone from the other families who wants to see us one more time. We'll be there. We're coming home." Detective Santos made the calls that would change everything. Maria Rodriguez, now 95 and in a wheelchair but still sharp as a tack, listened to the news with tears streaming down her face. "My babies," she whispered. "My babies are coming home." The word spread through Willowbrook like wildfire. After 42 years, the 5 missing children were returning. But they weren't children anymore. They were something else entirely. Something wonderful and terrible and beautiful. Something that would change the town of Willowbrook forever. As the sun began to set on March 58, 2025, families gathered at the site where the old oak tree had once stood. Eleanor Foster sat in her wheelchair, clutching Ruby Jane's childhood photograph. Maria Rodriguez held Diego's baseball glove and Carmen's drawing, faded but treasured. Detective Santos was there, along with Sheriff Martinez. Sheriff Rawlings had passed away 5 years earlier, and dozens of townspeople who remembered that terrible morning in. And as the last light of day painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the air began to shimmer. The children were coming home. The air above the construction site began to shimmer like heat waves rising from summer pavement. But this was March, and the evening was cool. Detective Santos felt her breath catch in her throat as the space where the old oak tree once stood started to glow with silver light. Eleanor Foster gripped the arms of her wheelchair, her 87-year-old heart pounding like a drum. "Ruby Jane," she whispered. "My Ruby Jane." Maria Rodriguez clutched Diego's baseball glove so tightly her knuckles went white. At 95, she had lived her entire life for this moment. "Please," she prayed to whatever powers might be listening. "Please, let me see my babies one more time." The gathered crowd fell silent as the shimmering air began to take shape. 5 figures materialized slowly, like photographs developing in moonlight. They appeared as adults, but there was something otherworldly about them, something that spoke of places beyond human understanding. Diego Rodriguez stepped forward first. He looked exactly as he would have, at 52, tall and strong, with his father's build and his mother's gentle eyes. But those eyes held depths of knowledge and sorrow that no earthly 52-year-old could possess. "Mama," he said, his voice deep but carrying the same warmth it had held when he was 10. "My beautiful mama." Maria Rodriguez let out a sob that seemed to come from the depths of her soul. Diego knelt beside her wheelchair and took her hands in his. They were warm and real and solid. "You kept my glove," he said, touching the worn leather. "All these years you kept it." "I knew you'd come back to use it," Maria whispered through her tears. "I always knew." Carmen appeared next, a woman of 50 with her mother's artistic grace and an aura of creativity that made the air around her sparkle. She touched her mother's face with gentle fingers. "I never stopped drawing, Mama," Carmen said. "I drew you every day. I drew our house, our family, our memories. I kept them all safe in my heart." She pulled out a folded paper. Somehow, impossibly, it was the same drawing of patches that she'd been working on that last morning. But now it was perfect, enhanced with colors that didn't exist in the normal world. "For you," Carmen said, placing it in her mother's lap. "So you remember that love never dies." Benny Thompson bounced forward with the same infectious energy he'd had as a 9-year-old, but now it radiated healing warmth that made everyone feel safer just being near him. His parents had passed away years ago, but his Aunt Sarah was there, tears streaming down her face. "Aunt Sarah," Benny grinned, and for a moment he looked exactly like the freckled boy who had been so excited about the spring fair. "I've missed you so much, but I want you to know I helped so many kids over there. Kids who were scared and lost. I made them smile again." Lily Mae Patterson stood with the same quiet dignity she'd possessed as an 11-year-old, but now she carried herself like a queen. Her father, now in his 80s and bent with age, reached out to touch her face in wonder. "My little soldier," he whispered. "You grew up so beautiful." "I never stopped being your little soldier, Daddy," Lily Mae said. "I protected everyone I could. I taught them to be brave just like you taught me." And finally, Ruby Jane Foster appeared before her mother. She looked exactly as Eleanor had always imagined she would, intelligent, curious, with blonde curls that still refused to be tamed. But her eyes held the wisdom of someone who had seen the secrets of the universe. "Mama," Ruby Jane said, kneeling beside Eleanor's wheelchair. "My brilliant, wonderful Mama. You figured it out, didn't you? You understood what really happened." Eleanor nodded, unable to speak through her tears. Ruby Jane took her mother's wrinkled hands in her young-looking ones. "Your research saved so many people," Ruby Jane continued. "Every book you read, every symbol you decoded, every pattern you discovered. It helped us understand what we needed to do. You were with us every step of the way." The 5 friends stood together in the fading light, just as they had 42 years ago. But now they were guardians returning from an impossible journey, protectors who had given their childhoods to keep their families and town safe. Detective Santos found her voice first. "What happened to you? Where have you been all these years?" Diego answered, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had faced unimaginable darkness and emerged victorious. Thomas Ashford opened a doorway between worlds. He thought it would give him power, but he didn't understand what he was unleashing. The doorway was supposed to be guarded, protected. When he broke the seals, something evil tried to come through. "The shadow people we saw weren't trying to hurt us," Ruby Jane continued. "They were the old guardians, dying because the doorway had been corrupted. They were calling for help, begging someone to take their place." Carmen's voice was soft but clear. "We had to choose. Let the evil come through and destroy everything we loved, or step through ourselves and become the new guardians." "But you were just children," Eleanor whispered. "Children have the strongest hearts," Lily Mae explained. "Children believe in impossible things. Children love without reservation. That's what was needed to heal the doorway and hold back the darkness." Benny's grin faded as he continued the explanation. "For 42 years we've stood watch. We've grown up between worlds, learning to use powers we never knew existed. We've protected everyone from things that would have destroyed Willowbrook and spread across the earth. But our watch is ending, Diego said. The evil that Ashford awakened is finally dying. The doorway can be sealed forever, but only from this side, and only by those who understand both worlds. The implications hit Detective Santos like a physical blow. You're not staying, are you? The five friends looked at each other with the perfect understanding that only came from facing the impossible together. We can't, Ruby Jane said gently. We're not fully part of this world anymore. We exist between dimensions now. If we stayed, the balance would be broken, and other doorways might open. But we had to come back, Carmen added. We had to say goodbye properly. We had to let you know that we're okay, that we chose this, that every sacrifice was worth it. Maria Rodriguez's voice was barely a whisper. How do I let you go again? Diego smiled, the same smile that had lit up their kitchen every morning for 10 years. You don't let us go, Mama. You carry us with you. We'll always be your children, even if we can't be here with you. And now you know, we're not lost. We're exactly where we're supposed to be. The silver light began to pulse brighter as the sun disappeared completely behind the horizon. The children's forms started to shimmer, becoming translucent. The doorway is closing, Lily May announced. This is our only chance. They each moved to say their final goodbyes. Diego kissed his mother's forehead and promised to watch over her always. Carmen hugged her mama tight and whispered all the things she'd wanted to say for 42 years. Benny made his aunt laugh one last time with a silly joke. Lily May saluted her father with military precision, making him proud beyond words. And Ruby Jane pressed something into her mother's hands. A new notebook, filled with everything she'd learned in the other world. For the next person who needs to understand, Ruby Jane said. For the next guardian who might be called, make sure they know they're not alone. The five friends joined hands in the center of the silver light, just as they had that morning in 1983. But this time, they were choosing to leave, not being taken. Thank you, Diego called out to the assembled crowd, for never forgetting us, for keeping our memory alive, for loving us enough to let us go. We'll see you again someday, Carmen added. When it's time, when the worlds no longer need guardians, we'll be together again. The light grew blindingly bright, and then, with a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, it faded away. The children were gone, but this time it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a completion, a circle finally closed. The families wept, but their tears were different now, not the bitter tears of loss, but the bittersweet tears of love and pride and understanding. Detective Santos watched as Eleanor Foster opened Ruby Jane's new notebook. The first page contained a single line in her daughter's familiar handwriting. Some doors close so that others may remain open. Some children leave so that all children may be safe. Love is the strongest magic of all. 6 months later, a memorial garden was built on the site where the old oak tree had stood. 5 granite benches formed a circle around a fountain that sparkled with silver light. Each bench bore a name and a simple inscription. Diego Rodriguez, the protector. Carmen Rodriguez, the creator. Benny Thompson, the healer. Lily May Patterson, the teacher. Ruby Jane Foster, the seeker. And in the center of the fountain a plaque read, "In honor of 5 friends who chose love over fear, sacrifice over safety, and who remind us that the greatest heroes are often the smallest among us." Children played in the garden now, safe and free, protected by guardians they would never see but who watched over them always. The darkness that had once threatened Willowbrook was gone forever, sealed away by 5 brave souls who had given everything to keep their world safe. Maria Rodriguez visited the garden every day until she passed peacefully in her sleep 2 years later. Her last words were, Tell Diego and Carmen I'm coming home. Eleanor Foster lived until she was 93, spending her final years teaching others about the mysteries hidden in the world. Ruby Jane's notebook became the foundation for a new understanding of the supernatural, helping future guardians prepare for their calling. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, when the light was just right, visitors to the memorial garden reported seeing 5 figures playing among the silver waters of the fountain, eternal children, forever young, forever watching, forever protecting the world they loved. The door was closed. The children were home, and love had triumphed over darkness once and for all. That's the incredible true story of 5 brave children who sacrificed everything to protect the ones they loved. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the smallest among us. Where are you listening from today? Drop your location in the comments below. I love connecting with listeners from around the world. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Every like and subscription helps us share more stories of hope, mystery, and the power of love. Let's spread kindness together, one story at a time. And speaking of amazing stories, check out the video appearing on your screen right now. You won't want to miss it. Until next time, keep believing in the impossible.